Hi everybody, so this is a new tutorial on my latest workflow, which I find to have the least amount of artifacts and probably the most comfortable viewing 3D experience for most users who aren't really into a super amount of depth, but into enough depth to get the idea of a 3D effect. It's relatively simple, takes a little bit extra time, or elbow grease I guess, than you normally would put in for a conversion, but it's not too task intensive per se, and the workflow gets very easy once you do it a couple of times. So first things first, you want to procure your maps. So I use iw3. When you use iw3 to procure your maps, you want to take off edge fix and put flicker reduction to 0.99, and you want to change your stereo format to export disparity. Once you do that, you want to get the NEL maps and the any v2 L maps. So we'll start here. So what you do is you'd set NEL, you'd set the depth resolution to 518, 518 only. And then after you do that, make sure edge fix is off again. Sometime when you change the depth model, it reactivates edge fix, so you want to make sure that's off when you switch your models every time. For NEL, you want your foreground scale to be 0. When you output your v2 L maps, you want this at negative 0.5 for foreground scale. But for now, with NEL, it'll be 0. You will select a video. What I like to do is I like to convert my video in DaVinci into frames inside of an RGB folder that I created. That way all the frames are there. I know exactly how many frames there are. And I can match them up directly to the depth frames to make sure there's no disparity between the depth frames and the number of RGB frames. After you do that, whether you put in your video or your folder of RGB, if you're going to do a video, you find a video you want, you select it, click open, and it'll open inside the input. You choose your output folder. In this case, it's this right here for me. And then from here, you click low VRAM FP16 and click start. And it'll convert out your frames. When the frames are converting out, it'll convert out into a folder called depth. And while that's doing that, after it's done, it'll also have an audio file and an iw3 underscore export file. This export file is important, so don't delete that. Keep everything that's in that folder for the export disparity. Once all your maps are done, you'll get them in this folder right here, in the depth folder, where you output it. And you're going to want to cut these maps. These aren't the V1 maps, these are my finished blended maps. But what you want to do is you'll see these V1 maps in this folder. You just select all these and you cut them and you paste them in the V1 folder in the depth blender folder for the project. Then that'll populate this V1 folder. Now you'll go back to iw3, go to any v2L, make sure edge fix is off again, and set that foreground scale to negative 0.5. Once you do that, you do the same exact thing, make sure low VRAM and FP16's on, it should be, and then you click start, and it'll export the disparity for the v2 maps. And then again, they will show up in this depth folder. You will cut them, and then instead of putting it in the V1, you'll go back to your depth blender folder, and you'll go to the V2 folder, and you'll drop your V2 maps in that folder. Once that's done, the job isn't done yet with the maps. You want to do a couple more things to them before you decide to blend them. For best blending practices, you want to go into DaVinci or any video editing program that allows you to input image sequences and turn them into videos, or at least videos for playback in the timeline. These will still be exported out as PNG sequences, but it will be able to read the image sequence in the timeline as a video, so you can edit it in real time and then export it back out into a PNG sequence. So what you do is, I'm going to use DaVinci for instance. What I would do here is I would take the V1 folder, I would drag it here under this right here, this little file manager side. Looks like a little folder with mountains on it. And you just drag the V1 folder into this spot right here. Not this spot, but this spot right here. And then it'll show up. It'll open up the folder, and then right here you'll see an image sequence. This will be more prevalent here. So this one has maps in it. So after you drag the V1 folder, you want to drag the V2 folder in. This is what that'll look like. So the V1 map and the V2 maps will both look like this in their folders. You want to go to your V1 map, drag in to the media pool right here at the bottom, and then drag your V2 sequence also into the media pool in the bottom here. Once both of these are in the media pool, and you make sure that they're set to the same frame rate as your source video, which is very important, or else the frames won't export properly. You want to go to your timeline, and your media will be in here. So if I were to go back here and drag this into media pool, it'll take a second to load in, and then you go to your timeline, and it'll be right there inside your media pool. This is where you take it, drag it, and drop it right into your timeline. And then if you click play, it'll play back. This is an unfinished map, obviously. This isn't completely blended, but this is what it'll look like. It'll be able to play back on your timeline. After you're done that, you want to go to your color tab right here at the bottom. And this is what you're going to want to do for both the V1 maps and the V2 maps. You're going to do these in parts, so you can choose which ones you want to do first. I usually do the V1 maps first. So for this part, pretend that these are the V1 maps. So for the V1 maps, you're going to want to either boost the detail now or boost it later. So I would suggest boosting it now. But the last test I did, I didn't boost that at all. All I did here was I clicked Alt-S to create a new box right here. And then I clicked my library of effects and typed in deflicker. You take that deflicker node and you drag it right onto that newly created box you just created. Set the deflicker settings from time lapse to fluorolight. Click the drop down menu on speed optimization options and uncheck reduce detail motion. Once you do that, it'll add a deflicker to your map and it'll stop all the flickering of that map for you, so you don't have to deal with all of that nasty popping in and popping out that you'd normally have to deal with these maps. Once you do that, you're going to go to your export tab. This may take a moment to load, but once this loads, basically what you'll have the option to do here, oh, here it is. Well, I'll just show you now. What you do here is you take away the name of the file. You don't need to save a file name. You'll go to Format, choose PNG, and at this point, you'll notice that the resolution says 1920 by 1080, but your maps are 910 by 518. Right now, these are my exported maps, so it says 1920 by 1080 right now, but right here the resolution, it'll say 910 by 518 instead. You're going to want to click this little cog on the bottom right and make sure that your timeline resolution is set to the resolution of your maps. So this would be, in this case, 910 by 518. Okay, and click save. And then now your maps will be 910 by 516 size. It'll look like this. After you're done that, you want to make sure that everything's set here. So PNG for your format, RGB 8-bit for codec. Make sure the resolution's 910 by 518, and the frame rate is the frame rate of the video source that you put into iw3 to get your maps. So if your video that you got in to create your maps was 24 FPS, you do 24 FPS. My scripts that I'll be showing you in this run 24 FPS video specifically. So if you want to use my Blender and my 3D Enhancer, you're going to need to do this with 24 FPS videos and then interpolate them later. Next, you're going to want to lower the compression level to 0 for the least amount of banding. Drop down advanced settings. Go down to force sizing to highest quality, check that, and force to Bayer to highest quality, check that. And where it says bypass re-encode when possible, also check that. Once that's done on this video page, go to File, And under File, make sure again that it doesn't add a name to it, so take away the custom name. You want to go down here, make sure that the use 8 digits in the file name, make sure this is set to 8. Click each clip starts at frame and set this number to 0. And then click replace existing files in place. This right here will make sure that it has 8 digits in the file name. So in the image sequence, it'll have 8 zeros for the first frame. Each clip starts at frame 0. That's why it starts with 8 zeros. It doesn't start at 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. And then right here, replace existing files in place. I do this to save space. So what I would do here is I would click Browse. I would go to the folder that has the V1 maps. So that would be the V1 folder here in the Depth Blender. I click that and select that folder as my output folder. And then you click Add Render or Add to Render Queue. It'll ask you if you want to replace. It'll come up with a pop-up window. Since there's nothing in this folder right now, it doesn't. But it'll come up with a pop-up window asking you if you want to replace or whatever. You want to click the Replace button because you want to replace those files in that folder. And then you click Render All, and then it'll render all the frames from this depth map sequence as a ping sequence, and then replace all of the ping images it's associated with inside that V1 folder. And then once that is done, you can go back and you can check your maps. You can go in your V1 folder; they'll all be here, replaced, and then you'll have your new deflickered maps here. You will do the same exact thing with the V2 maps. So again, you would go back to your timeline here, you drag in your V2 maps, and instead of your V1 maps, you go to Color tab, you do that Alt-S to grab another box, drop your deflicker, do the same type of deflicker, and then export it out again as a PNG sequence, but this time with your output location being the V2 folder inside the Depth Blender folder. That will again replace all the V2 maps in that folder. Don't forget, 910 by 518 resolution is the output for these map sequences. Once that's done, you'll have your V1 maps and your V2 maps completely deflickered, ready to go for blending. After that, since I have it on a separate drive and not on my local drive, I have to enter it in through Python. But some people I know can just click this any depthblender.py script and it'll open up for them. But right now I'll show you a different way of opening it up for anybody who's curious, just in case anybody runs into any issues. You want to open up Anaconda prompt. This will pop up. Now here, if you're on a separate drive, you would copy this file path, or folder path, go back into your prompt and type in cd space /d space, and then you'd paste that, click enter, and then that'll bring you into that folder specifically. If you are running on your regular drive, all you'd have to do is type in cd space and then your folder path and it'll come up. Once you're in your folder in the prompt, you want to type in python any depth blender.py. You click enter. It'll take a second to boot up. Once it does, it'll come up with this window. Depth Blender, enter width, enter height. From here, you want to enter in the width and height of your video. These programs and my scripts are meant for 1920 by 1080 source. So you're going to want to resize your maps to 1920 by 1080. So you set that, and then you click Process. When you click Process, it'll run down the list right here in the prompt, and it'll tell you what file it's on, and it'll show you all the things that are being completed, and it'll tell you it's finished at the bottom when it's done. Once that's done, you'll notice that what it does is it repopulates the V2 folder. So all the V2 maps that are inside the V2 folder will be replaced with the newly resized and blended V1 and V2 blended maps. So instead of seeing all your V2 maps here, you'll see your blended maps at 1920 by 1080 in this folder when it's finished. Once that's finished and you have your blended maps inside of this folder, you're going to want to cut these maps again and then go to your Enhance Any Depth Blender folder where your 3D enhancer is. You're going to want to go to the Depthy folder, and you're going to want to paste those maps that you just cut from your V2 folder that are blended and drop them into this Depthy folder. Once you're done that, That step is now done. Now after that, you want to go back into your DaVinci. You're going to want to start a new project and then drag in your maps again. Set the timeline to 1920 by 1080. That should be default, I believe, when you boot up the program. And then once you have your maps back into your timeline like this, the same way we did it the last time, only at 1920 by 1080, not 910 by 518, you're going to want to go to your color tab, and this is where you're going to do your little detail enhancement. So right here, you notice in this map, you see that black right here? What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to eliminate that black. So let's find a good frame here that'll help kind of solidify that here. This is a good one. So you see how there's a lot of black out in the background here? What you can do is you can take this contrast slider, and I want you to drag it upward, or downward, sorry, until that black becomes kind of a darker gray. So we're going to want it probably right around here. We could probably even do a little bit more. That seems good. So we got it right here. As you can see, all these blacks are now in the gray. What you can do from here is you can go down to the shade right here and you can drop it down to darken the background a little bit more. And then under highlight, high/light, you want to boost that up to 100. And that'll bring the whites back out, keep the blacks in the gray, and keep the midground where you need it. That way, when you go to create disparity in the 3D strength on iw3, you can set it higher, giving you more depth, but it won't create too much of a disparity between mid, foreground, and background plane, leaving you with less artifacts on your output. Once you got your map to look like this would be your V2 blended, or your blended maps, your V1 and V2 blended maps. Once they look like this, and you have those blacks more into the gray, you're going to want to go to your output tab, and you're going to want to do this again, PNG, RGB, 8-bit, all that good stuff. Make sure your resolution is 1920 by 1080. Make sure it's at the same frame rate as everything else you've done so far. In this case, 24 FPS. Make sure everything's the same as it was. Each clip starts at frame 0, 8 digits, replace existing files in place. Once you do that, you're going to want to click Browse, and go to your Depthy folder, and then select that folder. And then again, replace that ping sequence with your new ping sequence of the updated blacks into the grays. Once that's done, it'll be in that folder again, and then you'll be ready for the next step. So in this folder, you don't see it now, because I didn't actually do it, but you'll have your newly blended maps in this folder that are freshly edited from DaVinci. There's also one more thing you can do if you want to before you export these out to use. You can play with the mid and detail slider. So right here you can see it doesn't have too much detail, right? If you take this mid/detail slider and you slide it all the way to 100, you can get extra detail out of it. So you'll notice in these flowers, for instance, if I have this set to 0, that's what it looks like. If I have it set to 100, it adds that nice sharpness and detail around the edges. It really helps pop. It really helps to detail the map. So I suggest you definitely boost that mid detail up on your final blended maps at 1920 by 1080 before you export them into the Depthy folder. That way you get the best outcome for your video. Once that's done, you have your final edited maps in your Depthy folder. You're going to want to go ahead and take them, go back to your project folder for iw3. So you'll see your RGB folder, your depth folder, your iw3 export YML, and an audio file for the audio, your video, all separated in this one output folder. You're going to want to go back into your depth folder for that video and then replace these with the maps that are inside the Depthy folder. So copy the Depthy folder maps and paste them in here. It'll ask you if you want to replace the files to this destination. You'll say yes, and it will replace these files in that destination. if you still have maps in here. If you don't have maps in here already, which you probably don't if you did all the steps prior, it'll just paste those inside of this folder. Then you'll go back into iw3. You'll change your stereo format back to full side-by-side. You can take deflicker off, you can take edge fix off, and take foreground scale off as well. Put it back to 0. Everything else can stay the same. Right here for 3D strength, you want to do something between 2.5 and 3.5 for best results. I did 3.3 on my last test, so that's where that's at. And then for your convergence plane, you want it at 0.7 or 0.6 if you want slightly more pop out. I like 0.7 because it's set a little bit deeper into the screen, but 0.6 works too. Make sure it's a row flow V3, and your stereo processing width is at default. Once that's done, you want to go here, you want to go choose file, you want to go to that project folder with your RGB and depth frames for this video, and you want to go and click the iw3 export.yml and click open. This will use the iw3 underscore export YML file as your input. This will basically, the YML file or the text file will tell the program where to find the frames, where to find the depth frames, and to put it all together. At this point, what you want to do is you want to make sure your output is set to where you want the video to go. In this case, you're going to want it to go in the depth enhancer any depth blender folder where the 3D enhancer is. So you can save it right into this folder. So choose that as your output. You click low VRAM, FP16, and if you want to kick it up a notch, choose background removal, enable that, and choose iw2 net. None of these other ones, just use iw2 net. And then click start. That will convert your video with your newly made maps into a full side-by-side video. Once that's done, it'll show up in this folder. Well, for time's sake, we'll say this SAM side-by-side source MP4 folder or file is the file that we're looking for. Okay, so it'll look like this. It'll be in this folder. What you want to do next is you want to do the same thing we did with Depth Blender. You want to open up Anaconda prompt, but this time you want to copy this folder path, and then you'll do the same thing again. So if you have Depth Blender open, you close it. You want to type in cd/d, and you want to paste that file or folder path right in there. It'll open it up inside the prompt. Then you type in Python space 3D enhancer.pyw. Click enter, and the 3D enhancer will start booting up. So give that a second. Alright, here it is. So you'll be met with this. What you want to do is you want to put your input video in. Your input video is that side-by-side video you just made in iw3. So you go to your enhancer any depth blender folder, you click that, you click open. And then for the depth map folder, obviously, you click the depthy folder. That's where your maps are. And optional, you can choose a halo video. A halo video, that would be your source 2D video. So the video that you use to create your maps in the first step, you'd put that source video here for reference if you want to, but you don't need to. It's not necessary. And then from there, you'd click process. Don't worry about any of these. These are other things that I wanted to implement in, but I just can't figure out how to do it just yet. If I decide to do that later, I will. But for now, you're just going to focus on clicking the process button. Once you click that button, it'll start working. I don't think it'll say anything in the prompt, but if you go to your output folder here and your frames folder, it'll start outputting the frames like this, as a left image and a right image. From here, if you can do naked eye parallel view, you can actually preview your images from here and scroll down and take a look at them. But if you can't, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Just wait for all of these files to export. Once all the images are exported, you go back to DaVinci, create a new project, and what you'd do here is you'd go back to this file manager, bottom left here, and then you drag in, you'd highlight the X80 left, X80 right, and then just drag that right here into that folder, and then it'll create both image sequences for the left and right frames. Then you highlight these, drag them into your media pool, and then you can go back to your timeline tab. And then once you're here, what you want to do is you want to make sure that your timeline is now set to 3840 by 1080. Click Save, and it'll create your box like this. You drag your left frames into the timeline, and then you take your right frames and drag them on the top of your left frames in the timeline as video 2. Once that's done, you click your left image sequence right here, your left frame image sequence, and you change the position here under Transform under Video tab to -1920. So you just drag it all the way there to position it. So that's going on that side. And then you click your right, and you position this into the positive 1920. And then now you'll have your side-by-side 3D image put back or stitched back together. From here, you have a couple more options too. Say you want more of a 3D effect, or you want to play with a few things. You can play with the yaw of the image, and you can play with the pitch of the image. Those are fun little things. You can also zoom the image in. And you can reposition the Y if you want to. And you can rotate it if you'd like as well. But I wouldn't suggest it. Put that back there. I fucked that up. There we go. Alright, and now you have your side-by-side image here. Now you can go in, you can go to your tab here, and you can choose all kinds of effects. You can do a contrast pop, you can do edge sharpening, all that good stuff. You can go into your colors tab, you can play with your contrast, your shade, your highlight, your detail and mid slider, saturation, all that good stuff. This is where you'd play with that at this point in time. Now that you have your finalized 3D video here, what you want to do now is you want to go to your export tab, go to video, select MP4 for your format, codec H.264 for best compatibility for all programs. Choose your encoder, make sure it's at the same frame rate. You obviously choose all your quality stuff. This is up to you, but I like setting it for best streaming purposes, 24,000 kilobits a second. At high encoding, variable with a preset of slow, and a 2-pass on full. Get rid of enable adaptive B-frames, and make sure that your force sizing and force decay are checked with your bypass re-encode also checked. Go to your audio tab, make sure your audio is set, make sure you have your audio. If your audio is not going to be here, so what you're going to want to do is you have two options here. You can either go into that project folder with your iw3 conversion, where it had that audio clip in your iw3 export file and stuff like that, and you can drag that audio clip into your media pool and then drag it into here. Or you can take the original source video, drag it into your media pool, drag it up top to video 3 above these two, and then it'll add the audio from that video. You unlink those two, the audio and the video, and then you delete the video, keep the audio, and then use that audio for your export. And you'll set your audio to timeline track, AAC, and that should be good. File doesn't really matter. You choose the name of it, so in this case it'd be what, Transformers full side by side, and then you just click add to render queue and you'd save it where you'd like. Once that's done exporting, you'll have your side by side video. In this case, let's say this is it right here. Once you do that, you have a couple other options. You can either be, okay, I'm done, here's my side-by-side video. You can convert it to half side-by-side later if you'd like. What I like to do is I like to interpolate my videos to 48 FPS for a nice smooth playback, and it helps reduce that pop-in and pop-out effect if there is any lasting effect of that. So I use flow frames. So normally you'd open flow frames. It's to come up, and it takes kind of a second to load up. When this is grayed out, you're still waiting. When this is white, so you're good now. So you go to interpolation page. You're going to want to set the interpolation AI to this one, top of the list, browse video, and for the video input, you're going to choose your side-by-side video. So this video right here, it'll calculate it. It'll say how much FPS it is. In this case, this video is 23.976 FPS. It'll interpolate it times 2, which will give it 47.952 FPS at normal speed. After that, you want to make sure your output format MP4, H.264, very high with a iw3 8-bit. This is what you're going to want your settings to look like. And then you click interpolate, and it'll interpolate this video into 48 FPS and then export out. And then you'll have your finalized video that'll look something like this. Let's see if I can find it here. It'll look like this. I did a couple more edits here.
All right, Mojo,
on it
I got the car. I need the girl.
What I showed you, but other than that, it should come out pretty much like this.
I need money to take out the girls. What I need.
So yeah, that's pretty much all of it. That's how you use my depth blender and my 3D enhancer. That's how I do my workflow when I edit my maps. As you can see, it's not really that task intensive. It's just bouncing back and forth between maybe one program other than iw3. And my scripts are pretty easy. It's basically just select your files, then wait for them to export. So it's not very complicated, and it doesn't take much user input to do. The biggest task here, I would have to say, is just, you know, the editing in DaVinci. But since I showed you how to do it, and I showed you the best ways to edit the maps, you don't have to spend as much time figuring out what works best, because I've already done that for you. So as long as you just follow the tutorial, it should be pretty much smooth sailing. It shouldn't be too task intensive. You know exactly what to do with this. With that video that you've completed, you can post it anywhere you like. You can do whatever the hell you want with it. It's a pretty interesting method. I think bringing the blacks into the grays helps out a lot. Since you can set the 3D strength here in iw3 relatively high, you can go even past 5 if you wanted to. It will still create that large amount of disparity, but it won't. It'll have everything in the image. It won't have everything blacked out in the background, way too far in the distance, stretching out that disparity between the foreground and the background too far, causing those warping artifacts around foreground edges. It'll also help with that bending into the foreground edge as well, around vertical edges, which is very helpful too. But yeah, that's pretty much the tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on the Discord, whatever you need. But yeah, thank you for joining me on this tutorial. I hope this helps out.